Madam Vice President, thank you so much. I have a foreign policy and a domestic policy question,
Okay.
but just to clear something up that's been, in the news for the last 24 hours or so.
Okay.
Can you commit right now that you will indeed visit the U.S.-Mexico border, and will you do it soon?
Jeremy, let me tell you something. Yes, I will, and I have before. Listen, anybody, especially if you're from California, you know, I've spent a lot of time on the border, and both going there physically and aware of the issues. But the reality of it is that we need to prioritize what's happening at the border, and we have to prioritize why people are going to the border. And so let's talk about what's going on in the places that are causing the issue at the border. I think it's short-sighted for any of us who are in the business of problem solving to suggest we're only going to respond to the reaction as opposed to addressing the cause. And that's just a fact. If we want to, we all know that in our lives, in our personal lives. If you want to deal with the effects of a problem, then you have to go to the core of what is causing it. And so that is the approach we are taking. When the president asked me to deal with this issue, it was about addressing the root causes of migration. And the root causes are based on the problems and the challenges that people are facing in countries like Guatemala, which is why I was there and why I've spent time there.
Thanks for that. You said repeatedly in Guatemala that you wanted to provide a message of hope.
Yeah.
But you also came with a warning. You said, do not come. And you warned that would-be migrants would be turned away at the border. Why did you feel it was important to relay that message while in Guatemala? And are you worried that it may have drowned out your message of hope? And then on the domestic policy front, Senator Joe Manchin has said that he opposes the For the People Act and that he, quote, will not vote to weaken or eliminate the filibuster. Given Senator Manchin's position on that and the current makeup of the Senate, what is your vehicle for moving forward on voting rights in Congress? And is it time for you to perhaps look outside of Congress for progress on that issue? Thank you.
I know our capacity to give people hope in that region, in particular those three countries in Central America. And I have no question in my mind that the work that we have done, including the agreements that I've announced today, much less what will come of those agreements in terms of the work ahead, is going to have a very positive impact. It may not be evidenced overnight, but it will have a positive impact. When we look at what is happening in terms of the experience of people who are fleeing their home country, traveling through the entire country of Mexico to come to our border, it can be a very treacherous and dangerous trek. And I don't take that lightly. I don't take that lightly. But the reality of it is that we have to address the root causes of why they are fleeing. And again, I will tell you, over and over again with the people that I have met during this trip, who represent a broad swath of people of every stature, every cohort, if you will, from the indigenous people and representatives and leaders in Guatemala to Afro-descendants to people who represent LGBTQ individuals who have been the subject of persecution. Whoever I meet, what they will say is that ultimately they want to be safe at home. They want to be safe economically, meaning they want to be secure. They want to have corruption addressed so that it doesn't impede their ability to get the resources a government should provide to its people. And so that's been the focus. On the issue of voting rights, the legislation is critically important. And we have been, as an administration, the president has been unambiguous that S1, the For the People Act, needs to be passed. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act needs to be passed. What we are seeing around the country are attempts to interfere with a fundamental right of the American people, which is a foundation of our democracy. And by the way, this is not even a bipartisan issue. From my perspective, it is nonpartisan. What they're trying to do, these efforts to suppress or make it more difficult for people to vote, will impact a wide variety of people, whoever they voted for in the last election. Early voting, vote by mail, drop boxes. Those boxes don't have a sign Democrat or Republican. So we're going to keep pushing for what we need to do to push back and to stop these efforts to suppress the vote and to infringe on the American people's right to vote. So there's the legislation. There is the work that we are doing and will continue to do of uplifting the issues so that we can make sure everyone is aware of what is happening. And that's about the bully pulpit. That's about elevating public discourse around the issue. We will, and the president has announced this in terms of executive orders, we're going to encourage folks to register to vote and continue to remind people that in this day and age, I spoke earlier about a new era. And the president talks about it all the time. Part of this new era is a debate that is occurring around the world about the relative strength or weakness of autocracies versus democracies. That's real. And one of America's strengths has always been that we can hold ourselves out in the world and then hopefully travel to places where we have some level of respect because we say that we are a democracy and we are true to our democratic values. And again, one of the most fundamental of them, free and fair elections. People have the right to vote, and it is unimpeded. So there's a lot at stake on this issue that is about the legislation, but it is also about fundamental rights. And so we're not giving up.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Tarini Party from the Wall Street Journal.
Where are you, Simone?
I'm in the back, ma'am.
Okay. There you are.
Oh. Vice President Harris, in your conversations on the Strip, have you made any commitments to expanding legal pathways for migrants, including work permits, or for asylum seekers to apply from their home countries? And related to that, did you come to any agreements with President Lopez Obrador on Mexico taking back more asylum-seeking families who are turned away from the U.S. on the basis of Title 42?
So we had discussions that were about the need, for example, to re-examine travel restrictions. And there was an announcement after my meeting with President Lopez Obrador that you may be aware of, where we are setting up a working group to actually address that and figure out how we can move forward in that regard. There was a discussion about also what Mexico will do in terms of increasing its temporary work visas for people entering Mexico through its southern border. There were no promises made or any commitments, but we did have the discussion. We did not discuss Title 42.
Thank you. Our next question will come from Maria Fernanda at Univision.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. For me, it's an honor because I actually got to vote for the first time as a nationalized citizen, and I voted for you. So my question is, what would you say to these women, those mothers, and also women of color on both sides of the border, farmers, many of them who I see every day, as a message of hope, but also as what will you do for them in the next coming years?
That's a great question, and thank you. It was actually the subject of both days and a priority for me to convene women leaders to talk about exactly this issue. And again, this is not unique to any one region. We can look around the world and see that there is still so much work to be done to fight for the equality of women, to fight against the disparities that exist in every sector, be it education or the economy. And to your point, to give people hope in the process of doing that. What we saw in Guatemala, for example, where and it was a theme that is in the United States, in Guatemala, and here, access to capital. Big issue. Are women given equal access to capital, to the financial resources they need to invest in their own entrepreneurship in a way that they can achieve economic health and success? It's an issue that we have discussed in the United States. In fact, I'm working on this as it relates to our CDFIs, our community banks. But it is an issue here as well. So the work that we are doing in terms of our young women empowerment, which, young women of every age, in Guatemala is about a number of things, including looking at the issue of access to capital. The conversations that I had there included that women, if they don't have collateral, were not given a loan, but because of certain customs and the way things work out, they may not have title to the collateral that otherwise would be the basis of the loan. There were discussions about the interest rates that are being charged. Here we talked, just in this room, with women entrepreneurs about a very similar issue and what we can do to also use technology to get direct relationships with these women and connect them with financing institutions. This is some of the work that I've been doing in convening the CEOs in the US, including folks like MasterCard and Microsoft, who are interested in growing the capacity in terms of their digital health of these women so that we can do online banking. It's called fintech, right? Financial in technology. I will also say that in my experience, having done this work for many years, there's a direct connection between that and what we see in terms of violence against women. So it is a fact that a woman will endure almost any abuse if it means making sure her children are fed and there's a roof over their head. And one of the best ways we can ensure that women have power and agency in those situations is to make sure they have economic independence, so they can make the choices about where they are and they don't have to accept a false choice of either feeding their children or enduring abuse. And so when we look around the world, we know that that is true and that these issues are connected. And so let's see the interconnection, because part of the focus for us in this region is about violence. We talk about safety and security. Well, when we do that, let's also always remember the violence against women and children, and usually disproportionately so. And so there are many avenues through which we can address that, and economic empowerment is one of them. So thank you for that question.
Our next question will come from Monica Alba at NBC.
Thank you. Madam Vice President, yesterday you said you didn't want to focus on grand gestures as it related to potentially visiting the U.S.-Mexico border, and today, just now, you've stated more definitively that you will be going. So can you help us understand how this trip in particular to Guatemala and Mexico helped shift your thinking on that position in particular? And now that you've seen the root causes of migration and where that journey begins for many, how soon will you go to see where it ends for many of them as well?
The issue of root causes is not going to be solved in one trip that took 2 days. This is an issue that is long-standing, is in many cases generational. It is not a new issue for the United States to feel the effects of those root causes on our shores. It is not new for us to experience that people will come to the United States if they are fleeing situations where they cannot feed their children. So this work is the work that must be done with a commitment to going deep and making a commitment over a period of time, knowing that nothing that we can do will address it overnight. So that is my perspective on this issue, and I am committed to doing what is necessary in the time that we have to deal with the complexities of this. It would do a disservice to the issue itself, the issue at the border. It would do a disservice to the issue itself if that is the issue that concerns some. To address the root causes as though it's something that can be dealt with overnight. That's my perspective.
And our last question.
I'm sorry, on the what?
On the reunification task force report that the Biden administration put out, only 7 children separated by the Trump administration have been reunited with their families so far. 2,100 still are waiting. So I want to know if that came up in your conversations here, and if it's your sense that hundreds of these may never be reunited at this point, support those separated families to pursue a path to U.S. citizenship?
I believe that was a cruel policy to separate children from their parents, and many of them very young children. And the president feels the same way, and we as an administration have made it a high priority to reunify those children with their parents. And the way that policy was carried out, when it was carried out, and now we're coming in after it happened, is we've got to locate people. We've got to find people, literally find people. And we cannot give up on that. And it's going to take a lot of work, but that work is worth it. And we'll continue to do it. We'll continue to do it. It's fine.
And our last question will come from Tamara Keith at NPR.
Oh, yeah, we'll hold it. I'll take the mask off. Hi. So many logistics. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about voting rights because that is in your portfolio, and there's
Yes.
been a lot of news on it while you've been away.
Yes.
First, Senator Manchin saying it has to be bipartisan. Senator McConnell saying he won't support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So how do you move this forward? And also you mentioned the bully pulpit.
Yeah.
How are you going to use your bully pulpit on this particular issue?
So, voting rights. Again, one of the most important pillars of a democracy, which is that a democracy is truly a democracy if all the people have the ability to participate. A democracy is its strongest when all the people have an opportunity to participate and access, in this case, to the polls. We are weaker as a democracy when we impede, interfere with, or suppress that right to vote. So it's important that we understand what's at play right now. And these laws that are being passed are so transparently going to have the effect of impeding, suppressing, and making it more difficult for people to vote. So we're not going to give up talking about what the fix looks like. And the fix includes passing legislation at the federal level to have an ability to reinforce and to reinstate the strength of the Voting Rights Act. That's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It is to also put in place the rules and the laws that we were talking about as part of S1. The bully pulpit is going to be important. We have a representative democracy, and I have to believe, and I still retain faith, that when the people are aware of what is in their best interest, they will vote accordingly, and when the people are aware of what's not in their best interest, they will hold their elected officials accountable. So using the bully pulpit in a way that helps people see what is happening in the midst of all of the priorities people have every day is going to be challenging, but it's going to be critically important. The power to convene. You know, there are folks who have been working on this for a long time. So yes, I most recently have taken a role of leadership for my administration, but I am acutely aware of the people who have been fighting this fight, you know, for generations, much less those who are current leaders and have been doing it for many years. So it's going to be about reinforcing the work that they have done, listening to them about what they believe is most effective in addressing the issue. There's a part of it that is grassroots, and it's going to be about organizing folks on the ground to make sure that people register to vote. We're going to have to be clear-eyed that if these laws continue to be passed, the fact is it's going to be more difficult for people to vote. And so we're going to have to try and, you know, let people know, hey, you may not have that drop box that you voted that you used last election may not be there. There may not be any within any distance that you can travel. So these are the other options you have. All of those things are on the table. We have to. I mean, honestly, at the bottom line on this is that if we don't stand up for our democracy, I mean, what do we have left worth fighting for? Seriously. If we're looking at an era and an age where the threats to democratic values and principles are real, where people are saying democracy can't work, that it's not efficient, that it's not effective. I think most Americans, you know, when we raise our hand and place hand on chest and pledge allegiance, when we talk about patriotism, when we talk about pride, when we talk about the ideals, most of which we have yet to achieve but fight for, we understand that the fundamental right to vote is one of the highest ideals and measures of who we say we are. So let's be who we say we are. How about that?
Thank you, everyone.
Madam Vice President.
Thank you, everyone.
You signed a letter last year that criticized Title 42 and said that it was